the theme of the SOFA 2020, as it was mentioned by the Director General, is to overcoming water challenges in agriculture. Urgent action, as all of you, is needed to make water use in agriculture more efficient, equitable, and sustainable. At stake are both global food security and nutrition and environmental sustainability. There will be no nutrition without water. It's essential for us. The report presents new estimates on the incidence of water scarcity in irrigated agriculture and of water shortages in rain-fed agriculture. It also presents estimates of the number of people affected. The report presents three main entry points for action. The first entry point are the technical and management options at our disposal. The second entry point are the institutions and legal frameworks needed to enable the adoption of these technical options. And the third entry point is the overall policy environment necessary to promote a more sustainable use of water resources. The publication, a historical publication that it was mentioned, provides guidance on how countries can prioritize policies and interventions within these three areas to overcome water constraints in agriculture. Let me now go briefly through some of the key aspects of this report. First, as we all know, water is central to achieving several of the Sustainable Development Goals. SDG 6, in particular, calls for ensuring availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. So it's not only water for management, for agriculture, but also for sanitation for all. But water resources also play a key role for other SDGs. Water resources are essential for improving food security and nutrition livelihoods, health, and gender equality. They are crucial for increasing productivity, economic growth, and resource use efficiency. They are at the center of the global restoring and conserving land and water resources and strengthening resilience and adaptive capacity. Today, that we are aiming for our food system transformation, water plays a crucial role in this food system transformation and what we are trying to work together in this agri-food system transformation. Unfortunately, as this report shows, achieving SDG 6 by 2030 will be a challenge, like many other SDGs. Demand for fresh water is increasing as population grows, incomes increase, and diets change. Available fresh water resources per person have declined by more than 20% over the past 2 decades. As shown by the figure, this decline has occurred in every region of the world. Freshwater scarcity in particular is serious in North Africa and Western Asia. In these 2 regions, the average annual freshwater availability per person is below 1,700 meters cubed, the level at which a country's ability to satisfy demand starts to be compromised. Increasing withdrawals of fresh water are also threatening water-related ecosystems and the livelihoods that depend on them. And climate change, of course, which we know is affecting and disrupting rainfall patterns, causing increasingly serious water shortages in rain-fed agriculture, as well as bringing substantial volatility. These trends will exacerbate disputes among water users and inequality in access to water. And access to water is another major source of inequalities. Among the most affected are the small-scale farmers, again, deepening even more inequality, the rural poor, and other vulnerable populations. Now, agriculture calls the key to addressing these issues. Why? Because as shown in the graph in the green area, agriculture is the world's largest user of fresh water. Irrigation, livestock production, and aquaculture account for almost 3/4 of total freshwater withdrawals. While this estimate excludes rainwater, the latter also arrives in infinite amounts. Therefore, rain-fed agriculture depends on limited rainfall to produce more than half of the world's food production. Yes, the sector faces increasing shortages and scarcities of water. Rain-fed areas, which occupy 80% of total cropland, are threatened by water shortages in the form of inadequate rainfall patterns and persistent drought. Irrigated cropland, which generates more than 40% of the food production value, is challenged by increasing water scarcity, the imbalance between supply and demand of fresh water. So we face a significant challenge. If we want to achieve SDG 2, SDG 1, SDG 10, we need to look at this carefully, and we need to find ways in which we can increase substantially the efficiency in which we use water today. Given the importance of agriculture as the world's largest water user, measuring and mapping water constraints in agriculture is critical to identify hotspots as first step towards devising appropriate interventions. FAO has developed 2 indicators, which are used in this report to measure water constraints in agriculture. First, the historic drought frequency is used to measure water shortages in rain-fed areas, both cropland and pasture land. SDG indicator 6.4.2 on the level of water stress is used to measure water scarcity in irrigated areas. And today we even have predictive power in measuring water stress. These indicators show about that 1 billion hectares of agricultural land are facing severe water constraints. 1 billion hectares. More specifically, almost 800 million hectares of rain-fed cropland and pasture land, or 14% of it, are severely affected by recurring drought. And 171 million hectares, or 62% of irrigated cropland, are under high or very high water stress. The challenge of addressing water shortage is particularly severe for farmers in low input production systems. Those who use traditional varieties, mainly manual labor, and little or no application of nutrients or chemicals. Smallholders, basically. This figure shows the predominance of different types of production systems in each world region and how they are affected by water shortages and scarcity. The orange bars refer to the percentage of cropland under high input rain-fed production. The green bars represent low input rain-fed production. The blue bars show the share of cropland that employs irrigation. And for each production system, the darker colors indicate the share of cropland facing high to very high water constraints. The prevalence of different production systems can be seen as an indicator of the level of a country's agricultural development and its ability to address water constraints. Where high input rain-fed and irrigated production systems are prevalent, for instance in Europe and North America, farmers have greater access to modern inputs and infrastructure, including irrigation. They are better placed to cope with water constraints than in low input production systems. They are better placed to handle the risks. As shown by the bottom bar, for the world, almost 40% of global cropland is under low input production. In low income countries, the share is 77%. In sub-Saharan Africa, it reaches up to 83%. Less than 20% of the world's cropland is irrigated, but more than 60% of irrigated land experiences high or very high water stress today. The report also estimates how many people living in agriculture areas are affected by water shortage and water scarcity. It finds that 3.2 billion people live in agricultural areas with high to very high levels of water shortages or scarcity, out of which 1.2 billion live in agricultural areas with very high levels of water shortages or water scarcity. These are the most severely affected areas. It means that about 1 in 6 people on the planet is affected by severe water shortages and scarcity in agriculture. And this is something critical. Now, of these 1.2 billion people living in agricultural areas more severely affected, around 520 million, as is shown in the map, live in Southern Asia, and 460 million in Eastern and Southeastern Asia. However, the incidence in terms of population shares, in particular in High Central Asia and in North Africa and Western Asia, in these two regions, about 1/5 of the population live in agricultural areas with very high levels of water shortages or scarcity. In the remaining regions, between 1 to 5% live in extremely water-constrained areas. 5% may be perceived as negligible. However, it means that in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, about 50 million people live in areas where severe drought has catastrophic impacts on cropland and pasture land. Clearly, water shortages and scarcity in agriculture must be addressed immediately and boldly. That's the only way we will use these resources efficiently, and it's the only way we can achieve what we are aiming at the agri-food system transformation. Let me recall the 3 main entry points for action that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. First, the technical and management options at our disposal. Second, the institutions and legal frameworks needed. And third, the overall policy environment. This is directly linked to the accelerators that FAO is pursuing in its new strategy: innovation, technology, data, and complements, which brings institutions, governance, and policy. These are like the 3 legs of a stool. If one is missing, the stool cannot stand, and we need the 3 at the same time. Concerning the first entry point, many technical and management options exist to ensure efficient, sustainable, and equitable use of water, both in rain-fed and irrigated agriculture, as well as livestock production and aquaculture. However, in order to be adopted, options need to be appealing to farmers, pastoralists, and fisher folks. Incentives need to be clear. In order for these options to be adopted, we need to effective institutional and legal frameworks, the second leg of our stool. Effective institutions and regulations can promote effective water use in various ways. First, we need appropriate incentive systems, including financial support and favorable credit schemes and credit terms, especially for small-scale farmers. Second, we need to secure and transparent water and land tenure, which can empower users, promote efficient water use, and open opportunities for water markets. Community-based water user associations can bring together users to collectively manage water. Here, particular attention should be given to engaging women and non-consumptive water users, example, fisherfolk, who are often disadvantaged and ignored. It's also crucial to understand the status, trends, broader society context of water resources. Water accounting and auditing can create proper information base for improved water management strategies, the data accelerator. The third and final leg of the stool is the overall policy environment to promote sustainable and equitable management of water. We need to ensure policy coherence across sectors and policy domains. It's the first condition to improve the management of water resources. Every policy we do will have trade-offs, and we don't have coherence in those policies, we won't be able to manage water properly. Greater policy coherence across subsectors within agriculture is a further condition in order to avoid uneven and detrimental impacts across subsectors. For example, uncoordinated policies may favor irrigated farming to detriment of rain-fed farming or inland fisheries, but also across sectors. For example, the use of solar panels for irrigation is an asset, is sustainable, but at the same time will mean that you can keep pumping water non-stoppable because you are no longer paying for the cost. The sun is the one providing the energy. So it's something to look at very carefully. Trade-offs are there and we need to look at them. Within 10 years to go until 2030, all three legs of the stool are needed. We are to overcome water constraints in agriculture and achieve zero hunger. We need to start now and we need action as quickly as possible. The most appropriate interventions and actions within the three entry points will depend on the type of agricultural production. I would like to illustrate what are some of the most relevant options for rain-fed and irrigated agriculture, livestock, and inland fisheries. First, on rain-fed cropland, investments in rainwater harvesting and conservation can lead to major productivity gains, particularly if combined with improved farm practices such as drought-tolerant varieties. According to one study that we reported in this report, water harvesting and conservation could boost rain-fed kilocalorie production by up to 24%. Second, herds working on millions of hectares of drought-affected pastureland can increase water productivity, for instance, by improving animal health and through better use of pasturelands, feed, and drinking water. Third, the productivity of irrigated systems can be significantly enhanced through investments in new irrigation systems or the rehabilitation and modernization of existing ones. However, water accounting and auditing, as well as effective water allocation systems, are critical for ensuring sustainable water use in the long run. And fourth, inland fisheries will bring policy coherence across agricultural subsectors, and this is crucial. Inland fisheries depend crucially on the preservation of aquatic ecosystems, which are often sacrificed to benefit of irrigated farming. Water development projects must consider the needs of inland fisheries in terms of water quantity and quality, because they will provide an element of food of our diets, which is essential to assure the reduction of undernourishment and access to healthy diets. Now, I would like to conclude by making some key points on crucial issues of policy coherence and coordination. As we know, these are important for addressing any sustainable development and challenge. However, policy coherence and coordination are particularly relevant for management of water resources, both across and within sectors and policy domains. For instance, the water sector can be significantly affected by policies in apparently unrelated domains. In trade, energy, as I mentioned before, with the example of pumping water, agricultural subsidies, poverty reduction. However, impacts on water supply and demand of such policies are often not considered. Interventions in one agricultural subsector can have negative impacts on other agricultural subsectors. For instance, excessive access to water withdrawals for irrigation can damage inland fisheries. These are the famous trade-offs that we keep talking, which are essential in the food system transformation. Interventions and water harvesting upstream may reduce water availability for water users downstream. Only irrigated decisions making can ensure effective and transparent decisions that avoid excessive water use and take account of interest of all water uses. A series of elements are key for policy coherence, as we can see. First, we need to strengthen trust between actors, which can ensure effective coordination and prevent conflict. This is central. This can be facilitated by the development of a common information base acceptable to all key stakeholders, inclusive water accounting and auditing, and therefore fundamental. Coherent strategies are needed across agricultural subsectors. Rain-fed and irrigated cropland, livestock production systems, forestry, and inland fisheries and aquaculture. Also, the provision of proper incentives are essential. We need to have proper incentives in line. Often general subsidies pursuing other objectives provide incentives for excessive and unproductive use of water resources and lead to water pollution. We have seen experiences in many regions of the world of subsidies for energy to pump water, which have created significant problems. By contrast, properly targeted subsidies can promote water productivity and ecosystem protection. So we need to put a lot of emphasis in aligning incentives so that they provide and minimize the trade-offs that we have been talking. And finally, effective regulations must be in place to protect environment flows and water-related ecosystems. It's important to understand that regulations are difficult to be implemented, but if it is a win for everybody, that makes them more viable. One potentially important policy tool are payments for environmental services, provided to farmers for landowners who agree to manage their land or water shares for environmental protection. Here is a win-win situation. And that's where regulation makes sense, because we all benefit from it. So let me just finish by saying that we thank you all, but this is a very important topic and something very important that we need to keep in mind. We firmly believe that only immediate and decisive action along the lines proposed in this report can ensure a more sustainable and more equitable use of our ever more limited water resource now and in the future. This is one of the elements that we need to take care now, and is one of the core elements that needs to be in the agri-food system transformation. Thank you very much for your attention.